The Slash Filmcast is sponsored by Intel. Not that you would push your computer to new limits, but you could with the 8th gen Intel Core processor with Intel Optane memory. And when I say push, I'm not just talking about opening Photoshop. I'm talking about opening Photoshop and Illustrator and, well, every application on your computer at the same time, just for fun. The new computers powered by 8th gen Intel Core processors with Intel Optane memory are now faster and more responsive, which means you can open, load, and launch like never before. Learn more at intel.com/youcould.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast, the official podcast of SlashFilm.com. I'm David Chen, and with me are...
Devendra Hardwar.
And Jeff Kanata.
Welcome to the show, everyone. What we're going to do here today on this podcast is talk about what we've been watching, and then moving on into an in-depth review of The Incredibles 2, featuring Matt Singer from ScreenCrush.com. Really psyched about that. You can find more episodes of this show at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Devendra, your audio is a little different today. I think you're coming at us from a different location, yeah?
Yeah, I'm coming from my parents' place in Georgia, so I have a headset here. Hopefully it's not going to be too bad, but good to be down here.
Yeah, and I saw you tweeted out that you brought home some 4K Blu-rays to show the family, right?
Yeah, as I do every time. But I brought, Phantom Thread, Annihilation... what else? Blade Runner 2049. But I think most excited, I brought the entire Mission Impossible 4K Blu-ray set, which we just got in the mail, and I'm so excited to dive into those movies again.
Yeah, so first of all, Devendra, all great films that you just mentioned. I don't know if that I would watch any of those with my parents personally, but but fair enough. You know, whatever works for your family dynamics is cool.
I mean, Annihilation is pure family viewing. Come on.
Yeah, pure family viewing. Also, you did mention, that we recently acquired the Mission Impossible 4K Blu-ray set. Or 4K UHD, whatever it's called. Yeah, it's all 5 discs, and we are going to be doing a retrospective episode of those Mission Impossible Blu-rays coming up soon. So really psyched about that.
I believe it is actually 15 discs. Isn't each one 3 discs?
I think there's probably I've only cracked open a couple of them. I haven't looked through all of them, but yeah, there's a lot of because most of them include like the Blu-ray as well as the 4K, as far as I understand, right?
Yeah, so, a lot of discs. We're drowning in discs.
We're drowning in so many discs, so much Tom Cruise. So looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun. Stay tuned to hear when that's going to be happening, and be sure to catch up on all your Mission Impossible so that you can join along with the fun. Okay, in terms of what we've been watching, gentlemen, let's get into it today. I've been watching a few things, but the one thing I watched that I wanted to mention really quickly is Ocean's 8. Finally had a chance to see this. So, Devendra, you saw this, right? We talked about this last week on the podcast.
I have not seen it, actually.
Oh, you have not?
I'm looking forward to seeing it, but not yet.
You spoke about Gary Ross's lackluster direction last week as though you'd already seen the film.
Gary Ross in general, guys. I remember The Hunger Games.
Yeah, Hunger Games pretty rough.
When we reviewed The Hunger Games, I was like, man, there's so much good here except for Gary Ross. And then they changed that franchise to Francis Lawrence, and it got a lot better. So imagine that.
Ocean's 8, so here's the great things about Ocean's 8. Obviously, the cast is amazing. They have great chemistry together, and, the movie is a lot of fun. It's a great date movie. No hard feelings against the movie whatsoever. But what was painful about Ocean's 8 is it is like watching someone trying to do a Steven Soderbergh impression. I mean... it's in terms of the editing and in terms of the music, but it's not quite a good Steven Soderbergh impression. It's like a pretty lackluster Steven Soderbergh impression. And so imagine watching that for an hour and 55 minutes. You know, it's painful when you watch someone do an impression of someone who it's not quite there. You know, it's like watching a really bad SNL bit or something like that. And I think we already touched upon many of the issues of this film in our discussion of it last week, but when you try to do an impression of a fairly distinctive filmmaker, and it just ends up feeling like a pretty low grade copy of something rather than something bold and original. But nothing Nothing against the film. I mean, it is fun. But I did go back and rewatch Oceans 11 and 12 just to make sure that my viewpoint on this was defensible. Just to be like, okay, is Steven Soderbergh actually, in fact, distinctive? Like, is the quality of these films, are they, in fact, higher? And I think the answer is yes. Ocean's 11 helped create this genre. It was parodied endlessly, had a lot of cultural impact in a way that other movies didn't. And I think it still holds up as a really fun caper. Ocean's 12. This is a movie that's extremely divisive.
So much fun. Yeah.
Jeff Canada, did you see Ocean's 12? Did you ever have?
Of course, yeah, I loved it. I really did. I liked both 11 and 12.
Really?
I believe we reviewed 12 on the Totally Rad show, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah. By the way, quick side note: do you think they called it Ocean's 8 this time so they could leave it open for a trilogy?
Yeah, we did. This is what we talked about this last week on the show when you weren't here. Yeah, that is one of the reasons I think is so they can have an 8, 9, 10, and based on the box office performance, it looks like that will be the case. Like it is doing pretty well. So we'll see how it does.
I really want to see it. I haven't seen 8 yet myself, but based on what you're saying, I can totally understand. But I kind of also get the idea that visual style is a little bit the series. I understand maybe you would want somebody to come in and put their own stamp on things and be bold and original, but I can also understand feeling like, well, that kinetic Soderbergh thing is kind of part of the package that you're selling. So I can understand somebody
you
feeling...
could do it differently though, right? Like Edgar Wright, I think, has similar styles, and you look at like Baby Driver or something, and a lot of it's just a different way of playing the same melody. But I can't really say much until I see Ocean's 8. Yeah.
I mean, I think, the one way, the thing that really sealed it for me was the music of Ocean's 8. So I think David Holmes did the music for Ocean's 11, and that is, in my opinion, an iconic score. It is one of the best scores for a movie of that decade. It's very enjoyable, very stylish, very classy, and Ocean's 8 just feels like some music that you could hear on an elevator.
Wasn't that Pemberton though?
Pemberton is like one of the best composers alive today, in my opinion. I'm just saying, like, the score itself was not super interesting. It feels like it's just trying to evoke another score. You know what I'm saying? So I thought it was pretty rough. It just feels like a pale imitation, really, is the whole movie. But Ocean's 12 is one of the most divisive sequels of all time, I think, because it is such a deviation from the previous film. I think a lot of people were expecting like another really tight, well put together caper film, and it is not that at all, right? It is very much more about tone, much more about mood, much more about just hanging out with these characters, the relationship between these characters.
It's kind of like a deconstruction of a heist film too.
Yeah. Matt Singer actually wrote this great piece at Screen Crush. Our guest today on the show, Matt Singer, wrote this great piece about how Ocean's 12 is a meta commentary about the difficulty of putting together a sequel for a very popular film. It's like all these guys, Terry Benedict comes back and he wants the same money but more. He wants the same amount of money, but he wants interest on it. So it's like you got to make something, but it's like even more interesting and even more money. Their heart is not into it, but their heart is like they'll always be con men at heart, but like really like they're trying to force it sometimes in the movie, and at one point where the characters like we're forcing it and it's like not really working very well. So there's a lot of commentary about the difficulty of making a sequel in Ocean's 12 that I think is pretty interesting. So I think that movie is unfairly maligned and just wanted to give it a shout out, but I do think Ocean's 11 and 12 are still really solid. Ocean's 8, not a bad film, but there's a ceiling on how good that movie can be, and that ceiling is Ocean's 11, in my opinion.
Well, I noticed you. Do you remember Ocean's 13, Dave? Like, how does 8 compare to that? Because I remember not liking.
Yeah, I would say they're fairly comparable. I mean, Ocean's 13 feels like a pale imitation of Ocean's 11.
Why are we doing this again? Yeah.
The only benefit of Ocean's 13 is you have Al Pacino doing a fairly classic Al Pacino performance. But yeah, Ocean's 13 is not a particularly interesting movie.
And Topher Grace. Don't forget Topher Grace.
Oh yeah, Topher Grace.
Yeah.
He's also great in Ocean's 11 and 12. He has a really fun.
Oh
cameo.
yeah.
But we mentioned box office, in our conversation, or I mentioned box office. Wanted to throw out a couple of details, follow up from last week, actually. I should have gotten to this first, but I'm a little disorganized because we're recording at 7 a.m. in the morning, so apologies for that. But couple follow-ups. First of all, Hereditary continues to do really well at the box office. I mean, this is an extremely low-budget film and has already made, in the United States, $27 million. That's more money than The Witch made in its entire run, and it's another A24 horror film that did pretty well. We got a bunch of emails about Hereditary this week. This email comes in from Will McPherson, who writes into /filmcast@gmail.com. Saw Hereditary this past weekend and absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, my audience did everything in their power to ruin it for me. Apparently, provocative imagery is hilarious. I had similar experiences with previous A24 releases, The Witch and It Comes at Night. General audiences aren't looking for well-written, superbly acted original content from their horror movies. The fact that people were laughing at it as if it were somehow beneath them, I find it discouraging. Then again, Trump is our president. Why do I even give a shit about anything? Why do I even let me repeat that again. Why do I even give a... Why am I having trouble with this? Why do I even give a shit about anything? That email comes in from Will, writing into /filmcast@gmail.com.
2018 mood, by the way.
2018 mood. This is an email and a tweet, that we've gotten from a bunch of people that basically people watched Hereditary, and there was a lot of, Jeff Kanata, no spoilers. There's a bunch of horrifying imagery in Hereditary, and people have laughed at it rather than reacting in the way that they're supposed to. I saw this movie at a press screening. Everyone was very respectful. But I can imagine it completely ruining my experience if people were laughing at it. Jeff, have you been in movies where people have been laughing when they're supposed to be, scared or silent?
Yeah. There are different kinds of laughter, right? There's uncomfortable laughter. There's laughter because you don't know how else to react.
Right.
And sometimes that can be good. It can mean the movie is working as intended. But I do think the irony culture that we're currently in, the everything is for lulz culture that we're in, I think that our emailer references that a bit. Certainly that can feel very frustrating if you're super invested in something. And my biggest gripe, and we're kind of bordering on /film court right now, but
it's a mini /film court here. Yep.
Yeah. My biggest gripe, and this happens frequently in Los Angeles, and I think you can infer why. My biggest gripe is when people react, laugh, etc., as a way of performance for the rest of the audience, as a way of, hey, I'm saying something so that you guys give a reaction to me. Yeah. I am performing for you. I am laughing as a way of saying something, not because it's a genuine moment of laughter, but because I would like to comment on the film to the rest of the audience. And that just chaps my hide, no end.
Yeah, it's like we're not going to see the film to see you, random person of the audience. We're going to see the film.
Right.
But
that often happens during trailers, by the way. I mean, I have my eyes and ears closed during trailers, but I've often noted people, trying to make a comment on the trailer by laughing at it instead of with it.
Well, that I don't mind as much because it's just a trailer; it's not the actual movie. But fair enough. Devindra, I think the question is like if someone were to laugh during the screen, you can't stop people from having their normal human reaction to the film, right? So like, I don't really know that there's that much you can do other than maybe
you can't do anything.
Leave the theater and like try for a different screening, which is not a luxury that a lot of people have.
Of fellow humans, basically, like that's the problem, and that's the risk you take when you do anything in public. So that is the magic and the curse of going to the cinema. For me, like I think people laughed at the appropriate points because the movie is darkly funny at times. Like there is a dinner conversation that I think is hilarious in how deep and cutting it can be. And yeah, So it's not like you're never supposed to laugh at that movie. I think some people laugh at scary things because they don't know how else to respond, and then some people are just kind of dicks about it. It's like, oh man, look at this stupid thing. It's supposed to be scary, but I'm just gonna laugh at it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a normal reaction, but it is unfortunate that a lot of people had their screenings ruined by people laughing at the movie. But yeah, there's nothing you can do. But appreciate people like Will writing in. We got a bunch of emails like that. And Hereditary, Jeff Kanata, worth checking out. Probably in an empty theater. So
I've been told I might not want to have seen this.
Yeah, Dave. Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, maybe don't. Maybe just wait on this movie, and certainly not alone in an empty theater.
Yeah, I guess it's not a movie you want to watch if you have two kids.
That's what I've been told. Yeah,
and just knowing Jeff too, like I feel like this movie will destroy you. So let's not do that yet. Let's wait till after.
You know, if you want to watch movies to feel something, it's a good one to watch, Jeff.
It'll make you feel something. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I it's not high on my list of things to rush out to, just because I'm not sure I want to put myself through that. I mean, the news is putting me through that daily, so who knows? But yeah, I'm curious, very curious.
All right. Well, just wanted to give a shout out to all those emailers. Anyway, back to what we've been watching. Sorry about going a little out of order, guys. Devindra, you've been watching some stuff this week.
Yeah, I saw First Reformed, the new film by Paul Schrader. You know, that he's a well-known guy, the writer of Taxi Driver and so many great classic films. This movie is kind of amazing. It's imagine if Travis Bickle were a priest. Like, imagine it's basically like that premise, except set today. It stars Ethan Hawke as a priest who's kind of lost his faith in God, mainly because the world, mainly because everything around us. Like, this is a very progressive and environmentally focused film. So it is a lot about him losing his own faith, and then he encounters one of the people, within his, I don't know what you call that, one of his, it's not followers, I guess, but somebody from his congregation who is also having a crisis of faith. And it's a guy who is like he's an eco-warrior, and he's about to have a baby, and he doesn't want to have the baby because he doesn't want to bring a child into the world today, because we've ruined the world, guys. By the time, that child is an adult, they will have to live through like the climate crisis that we've basically created for the past, several hundred years. And that is the main crux of the movie. And it's kind of an amazing thing to think about right now. Jeff, I'm sure you've had, these worries too. It's like, how do you bring a child into the world today? Because everything is terrible. And that is the entire like argument of the movie. That's what the movie is like struggling with and toiling with. I found it kind of amazing because it's one of Ethan Hawke's best performances. He's very tortured. He's lost his faith. He's also an alcoholic priest, so he's just like dealing with a lot of issues. And I think sort of like Taxi Driver 2, he finds a bit of relief from chatting with and working with the mother of that child, played by Amanda Seyfried. And, he forms a connection with her, and she kind of shows him that, maybe there is something to live for. It feels like Taxi Driver redone today in the setting of like, a Protestant church. It's a beautiful film. It is kind of amazing that it deals with, really pressing issues right now. And at the same time, I think what's amazing about this movie, I won't say too much about the ending, but basically, you're not going to get the catharsis you maybe want from a movie like this. And I love how this movie kind of deals with that fact. It's kind of incredibly cynical in how it approaches all this, but also very realistic. So I found it fascinating and definitely worth watching on a big screen too. It's a beautiful film, so worth checking out.
First Reformed is out in theaters now. You saw it in a theater in New York, I assume.
Yeah. It's worth it. And this is another movie where I feel like you go and people will just start laughing at certain aspects of it. Huh. But it goes places I certainly did not expect.
Very cool. I've heard great things about it. I've heard it's one of the best films of the year. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to checking it out. That's First Reformed. It has a 96% Rotten Tomatoes right now. It's out in theaters right now. Jeff Kanata, you've been watching some stuff, right?
Yes, my wife and I watched all the way through Killing Eve, the BBC. We watched it on BBC America.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is, I believe, 8-episode series about a serial killer and the law enforcement person obsessed with tracking her down. It is really good. I was very dissatisfied with how it wraps up. The last few episodes I found very, very unsatisfying. But I would recommend the show. It's very pulpy. It starts out, I think, really, really strong, and then sort of, in my opinion, loses its way. But the performances are so strong, and it is mostly a all-female cast. So you don't usually see stories like this done with all women, especially, a female serial killer, assassin. It almost feels like a companion piece to Red Sparrow in a lot of ways. And Red Sparrow certainly informed it because
it's as if Red Sparrow were fun, basically.
Yeah. It's like a different character from the same school that Red Sparrow went to, like having her own adventures. So interesting. If you've seen Red Sparrow, I think it'll sort of add to that experience. But Sandra Oh plays the I can't even.
She's an MI5 agent.
MI5. That's what it is. Yeah. Thank you. And I just think Sandra Oh is such a phenomenal actress. She's so good, and she's particularly great in this. But the sort of gobsmacking performance comes from Jodie Comer, I think that's how you pronounce it, who is a British actress who plays Villanelle, the serial killer assassin, and just gets to chew scenery. I mean, she just gets to have so much fun because she plays this, insane, over-the-top killer, but she does it with such panache and fun. It is, like I said, very pulpy, more pulpy than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a more sort of straight-laced crime kind of show, but it goes wacky. And there's some fun in that, but ultimately, where it ends up, I found myself pretty dissatisfied with. It'll be interesting to see if they do a season 2. It's certainly a possibility of that at the end of this, but it's a fun ride. My wife and I were both hooked just from the first episode, and I think people will enjoy it. If you're curious and need a new show to watch, I think you can power through 8 episodes of this on the BBC America app as we did, and have some fun. It's like I said, great performances. Some really fun moments, but and also Fiona Shaw is in it. I'm a huge Fiona Shaw fan. She's great. Did you watch all of this?
Written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge too, like most of the show. So, there's a lot of good things here, Jeff. Yeah, I saw it all. I loved it all. What I love is that it can be fun and pulpy and zany at times, and then instantly dramatic. Like there's always there is an air of tension around it all because this is such a cat and mouse game. People die, and you feel that dramatic loss too.
Yeah.
So it balances, it juggles a lot of balls, I think. And I think it's really fascinating because of that.
I found it frustrating in the sense that Eve Pilastri, played by Sandra Oh, is constantly doing the worst thing you could do in any situation, and I found that a little frustrating. And I know she's supposed to be a rogue, sort of she's thrust into this position that.
But she's also driven by obsession in a weird way too. It is sort of like the Heat thing, where the cop is obsessed about getting this guy, and then the killer, is also obsessed with the cop in a way. Like I don't know, that relationship is something I don't think we've seen before. Certainly not in a spy thing like this.
No, I agree with that 100%. I felt they leaned into that a little too hard for my money. Just it felt a little bit. I didn't buy that relationship. I felt like it was a little forced for me, and maybe it works better as a novel where you can see the inner workings of brains. But again, very worth watching and a lot of fun. And I can recommend Killing Eve on BBC America.
All right, very cool. Killing Eve, heard great things about it. I am hoping to check it out at some point. I have it all DVR'd on my YouTube TV account, so Looking forward to diving into it there.
You know, that's Sandra Oh. She gets a new job in that show, Dave.
Oh, really? She gets a new job, huh?
She gets a new job at the MI5.
Getting a new job, it can be a challenging thing to do. It can be challenging if you're hiring as well, to find the right candidate.
I believe Sandra Oh. I mean, Sandra Oh is great. I would believe Eve Pilastri, her character. It turns out not the strongest candidate. It turns out the MI5 may have been able to find a stronger candidate for that job. Were they only to use a service like LinkedIn? Oh, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, our sponsor, because, a business is only as strong as its people, and every hire matters. So if you're looking to hire someone, don't settle for posting and just hoping for the right person, because then you might get somebody like Eve Pilastri that just ruins everything and makes it all crazy. No, you want a place like LinkedIn, which is the world's largest professional network. And it's more than that. It's a way for people to stay in contact, sure, professionally, but it's also the best way to find great talent. If you are trying to hire for your job, why not go to the place where everyone already is? And think about it. Do you check job boards? Do you go to job boards and just search for jobs? Most people don't. It's a pretty rare occasional thing for most people, but a lot of professionals are on LinkedIn. World's largest professional network. People are there already. Why not use that? That's where people go daily. And 70% of the U.S. workforce is already on LinkedIn. 22 million professionals view and apply for jobs on LinkedIn every week in every industry, even yours and mine. And businesses rate LinkedIn jobs 40% higher than job boards at delivering quality candidates. So here's what I recommend. Go to linkedin.com/filmcast and get a $50 credit toward your first job post. That's linkedin.com/filmcast for your $50 credit today. Terms and conditions apply.
Before we get to our review of Incredibles 2, we want to thank all the people who donated to the podcast this week. Thanks to James Chapman, Nathan from the Fast Food Friends podcast, and Hugh from Australia. Hugh, a longtime supporter of our work. Thank you guys so much for your contributions. We really appreciate it. All the money you donate does go to help us defray the cost of seeing films and putting on the show. You can also donate yourself if you're listening right now by going to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/ and then the word filmcast. You can also go to /film.com, click on the /filmcast tab, use the PayPal links on the side of the page. So that is I don't know. So thanks again to everyone for donating. Let's get to our review of The Incredibles 2. So, Matt just pinged me. He says he needs another, 4 minutes.
Okay.
So we have this really awkward time now where we're waiting for him for 4 minutes.
You can talk about LinkedIn for 4 more minutes.
No, I think we're good.
Anything else?
Okay, so we're still broadcasting live right now, just so you guys know.
We can add one more what we've been watching. I'm just trying to think of what else.
No worries. I think we're good. We can just chill for a little bit. Are you guys doing anything for July 4th?
No.
I think so, but I'm not sure what yet. We'll probably be visiting some family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are you going to be out before or after that, by any chance?
I am gone the last weekend in June, like the 29th, but I'll be back by Monday.
Okay, I think Monday's like July 2nd, right?
Mm.
Let me look here. So, yeah, I'm gone 29th through the 1st.
Okay.
I get back in the afternoon of the 1st.
Which is Sunday, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Monday's the 2nd.
Okay, so we probably will have to record in the second then.
I don't think I'll have a problem with that.
Okay. By the way, here's a pro tip. Do not attempt to redeem ultraviolet or digital codes before the DVD has been released.
What happened?
That's funny.
Oh, because like, one time I tried to do that, and it was like, this code is invalid. Like something, you know, and because they don't like unlock the codes or whatever until the DVD actually comes out.
Yeah, and then they sent armed men to your house.
Well,
How do you have this code?
I basically then could not redeem it for real after the movie came out.
No.
Yeah, so that sucked. And then so sometimes we get these movies from PR firms that are trying to like get us to do press for them, and then one time I actually contacted Ultraviolet, and I was like, hey, I tried to redeem this and it didn't work. Can you please make it work again? And they said, we need you to verify that you are the person that originally purchased the movie. And I'm like, well, I can't do that, because I didn't buy it. And so then I just end up really pissed at Ultraviolet. But I'm actually really happy with this whole Movies Anywhere thing. Have you guys seen the Movies Anywhere?
Yeah, it's good, except it doesn't unlock the 4K versions in iTunes, and that is kind of annoying. Yeah, so I did it for Blade Runner 2049, which was very nice and convenient. And even though there is a 4K version of that movie on iTunes, if you go to it now in my library, you only see the HD version, and of course they have no way to upgrade. Like they even pay a little more to get that higher quality version. So that's the big downside of Movies Anywhere right now.
Huh. Well, in any case, I think it's been a lot better than having to, redo the entire like. It used to be such a pain in the butt to have to buy. There's like 5 different video services, and you'd have to, I have to buy it for Vudu, and then I have to buy it for Google. I need to buy it for all these things, guys, because I have 5 copies of Wanted on my. On my digital video library, because otherwise, how am I going to make sure I know exactly that I'm going to have it when I need it? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man.
David. The best example. That's the best example.
Yeah,
I like Movies Anywhere except for little things like that, because I think Apple's whole thing of like automatically upgrading to 4K and just offering the 4K releases at the same price as everything else is a really good deal. And kind of weird to be locked out of that.
Here's another thing I kind of wanted to talk about. Like, there's something else I want to talk about, but it was like it was such a thin story that I didn't even know, like, that there's that much to talk about. But I think what's funny is, so MoviePass, right? Their whole deal is, hey, we're basically giving these movies away, and in exchange, we can use our marketing might to drive traffic to theaters.
Yeah.
And they tried to do
nothing fishy about that at all.
Well, they tried to do that for Gotti and for American Animals, the indie film that we reviewed last week or a couple weeks ago, and it failed horribly. Like American Animals not doing well at all. Mm-hmm. Also, Gotti is one of the worst reviewed films of the year with 0% Rotten Tomatoes. So they really have been choosing bad films to test their model with. Matt Singer, welcome to the show. Are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Hey, man.
Hello.
Morning.
Hey, Matt.
Morning.
All right. Shall we get to The Incredibles too? You're joining the podcast in media res.
What does that mean? I don't speak French.
Okay. Let's just do this thing. You're editor in chief at Screen Crush, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go. That was from the trailer for The Incredibles 2, the newest film by writer-director Brad Bird. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Bob Parr, a.k.a. Mr. Incredible, is left to care for Jack Jack, while Helen, a.k.a. Elastigirl, is out saving the world. Joining us today for our review of The Incredibles 2 is the editor-in-chief of ScreenCrush.com. He's also a multiple-time Slash Filmcast guest. Matt Singer, welcome back to Slash Filmcast. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Really good, and good to have you on. And I thought it'd be great to have you on because you are a film critic like Jeff Kanata, who has recently become a parent, right? And The Incredibles 2 is very much about the act of parenting, and I think you tweet very often in humorous fashion about your parenting misadventures. So really, really glad to have you on today. And I think like you saw like the parts about parenting of Incredibles 2 really resonated with you. Isn't that correct?
It did, yes. Yes, a chill went up my spine and down my spine and then up my spine again. And then I passed out because I hadn't slept in 7 months.
Well, let's get into it. Matt Singer, like, what did you think overall of The Incredibles 2? Is this a movie you were even excited about? Because I think everyone here on the podcast right now was a fan of The Incredibles 1. Incredibles 2 felt like it could have been more of a cash grab than a really kind of exciting, new, bold, original idea that was begging to be made into a film. What did you think of this film?
I liked it. I don't think it's quite as solid and outstanding as the original film, but I enjoyed it. I saw it again for the second time yesterday. I actually took both of my daughters. One of them is 7 months old, so I don't expect her to remember too much of the experience. But I took my older daughter to the theater to see it yesterday. It was her first theatrical movie, and like the movie is like. To me, it's like a 3.5-star movie, but watching my daughter watch it was like, that was like 10 out of 10. That was awesome. So, yeah, I think it's very well made. I think you get to enjoy a lot of the time with the characters, and the characters are all really great. There's a couple of things that I question. I do wonder if, because supposedly this movie, I think, was originally going to come out next year. And Toy Story 4, I believe, was supposed to come out this year. That was like the original plan, but they pushed Toy Story back because they weren't satisfied with that movie's development or whatever. It wasn't going to be ready to their satisfaction. So they pushed that back and bumped this up. And there are some places where I think you can kind of feel they maybe rushed it a little bit, which is maybe weird to say for a movie that's 14 years after the first film. But I do wonder if it had come out on schedule next year, if it would have been even better.
Right.
But
yeah.
I've seen it twice. I liked it both times quite a bit. I didn't like it any less the second time. I enjoyed certain things maybe more the second time. I got to appreciate a little more the second time. So yeah, I think I would not put it amongst the masterpieces of Pixar or even quite on par with the first film, but I definitely would recommend it. I definitely think it's a lot of fun.
So you think it's like mid-tier Pixar, right? In the middle third of Pixar.
Solid Pixar, but not exceptional Pixar.
All right, Jeff Kanata, your thoughts?
I mostly agree with that. I do want to mention, I don't want us to not talk about Bao. We definitely need to talk about that.
Yeah. Let's get to that before right before spoilers. I have a lot to say about that, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but overall thoughts on Incredibles 2?
Right. The other thing that I would mention is that I rewatched the first Incredibles right before seeing Incredibles 2. And if you haven't seen The Incredibles lately, I highly recommend doing that because this movie picks up pretty much the moment that movie ends, which is an interesting thing to do 14 years later. But I highly recommend doing that. I think it will enrich your experience of watching The Incredibles 2. I agree with Matt that I mostly liked it. It's a very crowd-pleasing, fun movie. It doesn't feel like a movie made for kids. It's a movie about being an adult, about very much late stage being an adult. It's a movie about family in the same way that the first Incredibles was. But this one specifically, I think, is about a part of marriage that is, you've been married for a while. This is an interesting thing to do in what is ostensibly a children's film. There's enough fun silliness to, I think, entertain kids, as Matt has noted, but it is none of what it's talking about would resonate to kids at all.
But that's why there's so much Jack Jack, right? They love the Jack Jack.
They love the Jack Jack. Yeah, they do love the Jack Jack. It also feels like a very old-fashioned film from its point of view. And I kind of bristled at that a little bit. Like the idea of this movie, the core concept, which is built around the breadwinner being the man, not comfortable with his wife being the one out doing all of the work stuff and him having to stay home, feels like a very antiquated notion that doesn't seem as relevant today as it would have been, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that was a little odd to me, that the core theme of this movie doesn't even feel relevant anymore in a large sense. I did relate a lot. That being said, I'll now contradict myself and say I did relate a lot with the plight of Mr. Incredible as he attempted to care for all the children, because I'm in that situation now with my second child. My wife was gone for an hour this weekend. Just an hour. And oh my God, all hell broke loose with a almost 2-year-old and almost 2-month-old. Was nuts. Anyway, I related to that very much.
You took care of 2 kids by yourself for an hour?
Barely.
How?
Barely. I will also say that the promise of this sequel, as delivered at the end of The Incredibles, is completely abandoned.
Yeah.
So the idea that The Incredibles ends with the family uniting and being a team and taking on bad guys, the movie abandons that almost immediately.
Yep.
And you mentioned that in the IMDb description. It really just decides that that's not the movie it wants to be.
Yep.
And that's the movie we were all excited to see, is finally this whole family. And we even have a character say that at the beginning, like, I thought we were going to fight crime as a family. And I found myself agreeing in the audience and thinking, boy, that was what the fun thing was going to be, is seeing how this family team is going to work. And we get this awesome action sequence at the beginning of the movie where that is that. And then the movie goes, no, we're not giving that to you at all. We're going to go off and do something else. So I found that to be a little disappointing. But all of that said, it is a very entertaining film. I think the action sequences are far superior than in the first film, and maybe a lot of that just has to do purely with technology. Mm-hmm. Rewatching the first Incredibles, by the way, reminded me of how far we've come in 15 years.
Some of that movie looks rough.
Not only that, but it's also it was like, look, you can do a superhero movie in the big screen. Mm-hmm. I remember watching the first Incredibles and going, this is how you do a superhero movie. It's animated because you can just show them using their powers all the time, and now that's just a trivial concept. Like we already have numerous superhero movies, and they do use their powers all the time because you can.
Yeah, that was pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like that Incredibles 1 came out before all this massive success that Marvel's had. So it was like really different era when.
Was it pre-Batman Begins too, I think?
Batman Begins release date was 2005. Yeah, so it was a little bit before Batman Begins. Yeah,
so it was competing with like Daredevil.
That was the best we'd had until
Elektra.
That point.
Well, and Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2 is the same year as Incredibles.
Yeah,
that was a good year. I do remember that.
Yeah. Blade. Don't forget Blade, 1998. So okay,
but anyway. it certainly makes a Fantastic Four movie redundant, because it does all of that stuff that you would want from a Fantastic Four movie.
I would say the new Fantastic Four movie made the Fantastic Four redundant, but okay. Devinder Hardawar, your thoughts on Incredibles 2?
Yeah, what else is there to say about this movie, right? I really liked it. I think I maybe liked it more than you guys. But yeah, it doesn't reach the heights of the first one. I think we can all agree with that. But I found a lot to like with this too. I love it when sequels pick up right from where the first movie left off. It was kind of bold to do that 15 years after that first movie. And it does actually make a lot of sense that they didn't just go in with family, being a superhero team, because they didn't actually solve the problem laid out in the first movie, right? Superheroes are illegal, and they are still illegal by the end of the first movie. And this movie is entirely about like, okay, well, how do we kind of fix that? Because that's the bigger problem. And once we fix that, then then maybe we can actually be superheroes as a family. So I bought why Elastigirl does not want her kids to be doing this illegal thing. They kind of did it out of necessity in the first movie, and even with that first action sequence. But it made sense to me on a character level why she didn't want them involved immediately. But yeah, otherwise, like, I loved everything about this film. I wish maybe if it had more time to cook, the themes of like what the villain is actually trying to say would hit a little better, because it's just kind of it makes sense. And I think it's very appropriate for where we are today, but they don't really build on it in any way. Having a villain who essentially is making a statement on technology. At the same time, I think the Mr. Incredible stuff and him, finding the heroism in him just being a dad, I found really compelling, because they really double down on that in ways that, I don't know if kids will appreciate, but I found that really, really good and really interesting. And just have to say, the animation quality, I love the first movie completely, but rewatching it this week, it is kind of astounding just like how some scenes just feel very basic, right? Like there's nothing going on in the background, or there's like a very simple background pattern or something. Like there aren't as many scenes where there's a lot of things going on, where the world seems alive. And this movie does that a lot better, just because, animation quality has jumped quite a bit. We can produce, more detailed, 3D animation. And I really enjoyed the action sequences here too. There's a lot of really inventive stuff. I won't say anything until we get to spoilers, but there's one gadget in particular I thought was like, oh, I've never seen that before. And that totally fits with this character and her powers. So overall, really good time. I took my family to see it too, and they really enjoyed it. So that feels like exactly what this movie is for. It is a good, it's a good family, get together in the theater. And it's also incredibly well made, and something you don't see as often anymore.
We should mention that this movie killed it at the box office this weekend. Mm-hmm. It made over $180 million at the box office. That is $110 million more than Incredibles 1 made at the box office when it first debuted 15 years ago. So this is going to be this year's Finding Dory. I think it's heading for probably over $400 million. Has the potential to actually beat Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, depending on how well Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom does. So I think it is...
Summer movie wager ramifications abound.
Yeah, it's going to be... The implications are staggering to behold. But okay, my thoughts, and then let's dive into spoilers. We have a lot more to talk about. So here's what I will say about Incredibles 2. The experience of watching the movie is a lot better than the experience of thinking about the movie. And what I mean by that is, I saw Jesse from AV Club tweet the following about Incredibles 2. He's Rock Marooned on Twitter. He says, quote, "I certainly didn't find Incredibles 2 as interesting or challenging thematically as its predecessor, but as a superhero action movie, it cooks. Bird is just set-piece shaming the damn world," end quote. Mm-hmm. And I love that description of Incredibles 2, that it cooks.
It's true.
Dude, this movie freaking cooks. Like, it is, there's probably 4 big action set pieces in this film, and every single one is awesome. There's one in the middle. I'm not even going to say what it's about, but like, it is so inventive. And like, when I heard about the premise, like, you learn about the premise of the action scene, I'm like, I don't know that that's going to be that interesting. And then they make it extremely fun and exciting and inventive, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that I want to go back to the movie theater just so I can see that scene again. It is just a lot of fun to watch. It's a really entertaining, enjoyable experience in the theater. But I think that there are so many ideas in this film that are just completely half-baked. And I think thematically, it's extremely similar to the first film. Like, a lot of material is retread from the first movie. And I'll just say that overall, the theme is we should let super people be super. That's the theme of the first film. It's the theme of this film. And I found it, to be quite dispiriting when I watched the first film recently. Matt Singer, you and I recently talked about this, but I had this Twitter storm the other day where I basically said that Incredibles 1 is one of my favorite Pixar films, one of my favorite films of all time. But every time I watch it, I'm always struck by how mean-spirited it is. and specifically with how it handles Syndrome, and I actually think like The Incredibles in many ways are the villains of that story. And ScreenCrush.com published a YouTube video this week about how Syndrome is a hero and The Incredibles are the villains of the story, and argues very convincingly that that's the case. And I think, the first Incredibles is thematically messy, but I think at least there is a coherent sort of point of view there. And Incredibles 2, I feel like, just does a very similar thing in terms of what it's trying to say, but adds in a bunch of new half-baked ideas that never really pay off, in my opinion. So I think that it's a much more mixed bag, Incredibles 2. I feel like, we'll talk a little bit more about this in spoilers, but there's just a bunch of like themes introduced that are never really brought to where I feel like they need to go for it to really be satisfying. But as a movie experience, it's great. So
I feel like we can dive deeper into that in spoilers because we've talked about like the exceptionalism being promoted in the first movie. I actually think this one kind of dials that back a little. I think it's a little more realistic and a little more. The first movie felt like, oh man, these superheroes are so great, and these dumb people outlawed them because they're so dumb. Whereas this movie is like, that is, you're kind of reckoning with that, but also, how much money is the government spending to fix all the damage being caused by some of the superheroes or something like that? Like, I think there's a better balance.
Right. Like, it makes an economic argument against superheroes in this film. So
it's just like, a very pragmatic one, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get to spoilers for Incredibles 2, let's talk about Bao, the short film that played in front of Incredibles 2. I will just say that I wept openly during this movie. I think as it really spoke to it's about these Asian parents who are empty nesters, and one day the mom is making a dumpling or a xiaolongbao, and the dumpling comes to life, and then she kind of takes care of it as her kid. And it is a really weird short film.
It's disturbing on a number of levels.
It's disturbing and weird. I think I was listening to an interview with the director, and she was saying that when she was a kid, her mom once said to her, like, "Oh, I wish, you're so cute. I could just eat you up. Like, I wish I could just eat you."
My wife says that constantly to our kids.
Yeah, I wish I could just eat you so you could be in my belly again, and I would know where you are all the time. Yeah. Right? And that is a very weird sentiment, and this short film is an attempt to explore that sentiment. Matt Singer, what did you think of the short film? Did you find it touching?
I did. I enjoyed it a lot. It seems like people are. I mean, are we allowed to spoil the short film, or should I not?
I would not spoil the short film. I guess maybe we should have done this in spoilers, but yeah, do not spoil the short film if you can.
I mean, it seems like people are kind of split in terms of what they think of the movie regarding the climactic act in it, and whether they find it shocking and kind of funny and meaningful, or shocking and horrifying, basically. Yeah. And I sort of fell in the former camp, and I really enjoyed the short, and there was stuff in there that I could relate to as well. I think it kind of, some of the stuff in there crosses cultural boundaries, and I thought it was beautifully animated. I thought the dumpling baby, I don't know that he has a name, but I feel like if Disney doesn't have like stuffed versions of him, like in all their stores right now, they're missing out on a huge amount of money they could be making, because he's incredibly adorable, and I feel like they would sell many dumpling baby stuffed animals. But yeah, I thought it was one of the better Pixar shorts in a long time.
I thought it was very good. Yeah, this idea of the relationship between parents and their kids, and particularly for immigrant parents, I think it's a unique kind of anxiety that immigrant parents have, because not only is your kid kind of going out into the world, but they're going out into the world in this completely foreign environment that is unlike anything that the immigrant parent has grown up in. And so there's all this this extra layer of anxiety about what they're doing and who they're meeting and who they're spending time and how they're spending time, that I think is brought to life wonderfully in the short film. Any other thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I thought I found it amazing. I thought particularly the tech on display of food preparation was extraordinary. I mean, the gooiness, the sort of malleability of watching the hand create the dumplings was right there. I was just blown away. But also, yeah, it's beautiful, and I love the fact, here we have had a number of these Pixar shorts before the movies, and they are all of a certain kind of heartwarming tale, and I've loved 99% of them. I am a fan of just the concept of doing these shorts, and most of them do really feel like they're labors of love and from the heart, but most of them are like that little bird from whatever the last movie was, the little bird that wants to go in the water and then it's scared of the water and then it goes in the water. They're very tame,
safe.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Safe. Great, better word.
Yeah.
And the fact that this movie has this kind of shocking moment to it, I just loved that move. I loved that willingness to do that to an audience that's there to see The Incredibles too.
Yeah,
like that's
my audience gasped, during this.
I gasped. It's a gasp worthy moment. It is it's shocking and abrupt, and you don't expect a nice sweet little short like that to go there, and it's cool how it can put an audience in that place and then pull them out of that place, and you realize what all of that meant, and it's just really expertly done, and also, as you said, very touching and moving. I really was impressed by it very much.
Any other thoughts, Devendra, before we move on?
No, I loved it. It was certainly surprising, and also I was hearing some people just outright hating this ahead of seeing the movie too. So it's fascinating to me that there can be such of a divisive response to this. Like, there's so much going on here that there wasn't in something like what was it, Lava, the volcano one that we all hate, or
I
that
like
people hate.
Lava.
Oh man, like this is exactly like this is the anti-lava, and I'm very happy about that.
Anti-lava.
How dare you? How dare you? Dude, as I was sitting there watching this, I thought to myself, oh, the ramifications of what this means for Dave, and this very disturbing meaning for.
Look, guys, let's just say it. Okay, there's a scene where the mom is chilling out with her Bao son, who's like a dumpling, right? An anthropomorphized dumpling, and they go to the dumpling shop and they buy dumplings and eat dumplings.
Yeah.
It's like dumpling cannibalism. I mean,
that's dumpling cannibalism.
It's really, really disturbing. I'm still bothered by it even a day later as I'm talking to you guys right now. So, but I agree with you guys that
if every dumpling has the potential of becoming a baby, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
It's there's a lot that's challenging about it. There's a lot that's unique about it. It's directed by, I think, Domi Lee, who is the first woman to direct a Pixar short film, and so I think it is worth checking out and supporting. And I think it's one of the better and more interesting Pixar shorts. So, okay, let's dive into spoilers for The Incredibles 2 starting right now. So much to discuss, but let's start with this, guys. I think that there's a lot about this movie that I felt was implausible. The first film has Mr. Incredible going to work for an eccentric billionaire, and that ends up going really badly for everyone involved.
So we do that the day after, yeah.
So the day after, it's like, hey, another eccentric billionaire wants you to work for him.
Yeah.
And so let's do that. Like, that's no possible downside with that. I am a little bit this theme of like this extremely theoretically benevolent character then becoming benevolent has become fairly predictable in Pixar films. Oh my God!
I mean, the moment you meet that brother and sister, you're like, well, when are these guys going to turn out to be the villains?
Yeah.
You know?
It's not just in Pixar or not just in The Incredibles. I mean, there's another gigantic movie coming out this month that has a very similar structure.
All right. All right.
Iron Man
where
1.
a
Like, yeah.
what a very a seemingly benevolent, and the more benevolent they seem, the more evil they must
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Incredibly wealthy person sends the hero on a mission of mercy, and then it turns out to all be evil. I'm getting very sick of that in a lot of movies.
Yeah,
that one needs to be retired for a while.
I was watching Bob Chipman's review. He's Movie Bob on YouTube, and he said, two characters where only one would be sufficient? I wonder what's going on there. There's no reason that needs to be two characters unless one of them is going to betray the other one or something like that. So I did think that was kind of telegraphing what happened at the end. Let me ask you guys about this. This is a really interesting decision to me. The opening of this film. I kept thinking about, like, why would you open the film that way, right? The film opens with the dude, what's his name?
Tony Reidinger.
Tony Reidinger getting his memory erased. I thought it was a really, like, kind of dark opening for the movie, and I realized afterwards that, like, the reason they put that there was because there's no other place that scene could go in the film where it wouldn't completely destroy the flow of the film, right?
Yeah.
Like, thematically, do you feel like that is a good opening for the film?
Well,
like,
it does remind us, like, hey, by the way, this happened at the end of the last movie. It is that. It serves that purpose. Of, remember, I saw this girl, and then this thing happened, and that was so crazy.
So it's kind of like a primer for the first film, right?
It was
previously on The Incredibles.
Yeah, exactly. But what's funny is that they used the memory wipe machine, which was only in, like, the Jack Attack short. So if you hadn't seen that, it's not in the original film. It's kind of like Men in Blackish.
But they comment on it in the original film.
Yes,
he says, I've had to remove memories of all these people. Yeah.
And it's worth going back and watching that Jack Attack thing. That is
a deep cut in the Incredibles universe. But they use that memory machine on the babysitter, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, on the babysitter. And then you see, like, in the movie, you get her calls, like her frantic calls about the baby. And in that short, you see, like, what she dealt with.
What she went through, yeah.
So,
yeah. All right. So here's another question, gentlemen, which is... and this, I think, really sums up how the movie kind of blows it when it comes to some of the broader themes and arcs, is what happened with the Underminer? Like, they just completely, this massive action set piece, and then the character is never even referenced again ever in the film, right?
Right.
I think, like, the movie, like, there's literally a scene in this film where two characters are just saying the themes of the movie at each other. You know, Elastigirl and Miss Deaver are just talking, and they're like, "But what's better, being a good salesman or being a good ideas?" You know, it's just like, what is going on here? Like, the movie kind of introduces these ideas, but does nothing to pay them off. Screenslaver is another great example of you have this character who has introduced this idea of. We are all slaves to our TV screens, and there's this really beautifully, quote unquote, shot and edited sequence where Elastigirl is trying to find Screenslaver while Screenslaver is monologuing about how you watch superhero films because you are weak, and because you prefer a simulated reality as opposed to real reality. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really getting to me. But the movie does nothing, in my opinion, to set up a rival viewpoint to that. It doesn't say, like, oh no, like shared stories bring us together, and that's what The Incredibles are all about. Like, it does nothing other than the meta idea of seeing the movie itself. It does nothing to kind of set an opposing view to Screenslaver. Matt, what do you think of that? The villain Screenslaver, the ideas behind it, the execution. Your thoughts?
Well, I felt like the scene you're talking about with that monologue is sort of kind of cheeky, subversive fun, because you have this villain talking about, like how people are enslaved to not just their screens, but it's basically like this anti-corporate, anti-capitalist, anti-consumer rant from, the biggest entertainment conglomerate on the planet, which is, it's sort of cute, I guess. To me, when you talk about, well, where's the alternative viewpoint, I would think, ideally, the alternative viewpoint is just how entertaining the film is and enjoying the film. And I guess the other way to look at it would be the Screenslaver is talking about how super the superness of these super people, that they are superior and we want them to take care of us, and and they let us be, I don't know, slaves or whatever. It isn't entirely coherent, but what you see in the movie is the superheroes are not super, quote unquote. Like the whole point of The Incredibles is that these are ordinary people. Their problems are mostly mundane. Yes, there is the screenslaver, but Mr. Incredible, I don't think wears his costume after the first scene, like until the very last scene of the movie. Like his problems are getting the kids on the bus to school, learning how to teach his son math, keeping up with a baby who refuses to sleep. And yes, all of there are superheroic elements to all of these plot threads. Like Violet rejecting or renouncing superheroes or whatever it is. But you could easily cut around those or remove those and make this just a story about a mom on a business trip and a dad who's dealing with 3 kids who are all having issues. They're not mythic Promethean gods. They are ordinary people who have powers. And I think the idea is that all of us, in our own way, are sort of are super heroic in our own lives just by doing the things we do. There's the other, perhaps a little prescriptive line where what's her name, the fashion designer says, done properly, being a parent is a heroic act, which is pretty on the nose, but I think is definitely what the movie is trying to express. So
pretty good, Edna.
Yeah, that's pretty good Edna mode
Thank-
impression. Very nice.
Thank you. Oh, Edna. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I don't remember things anymore. That's another fun part about having 2 small children. So yeah, that to me would be the sort of the other. If you're looking for the rebuttal, I think it's you're sort of on the one hand complaining about some of the very on the nose commentary in the film, and you're not wrong about that. But then I would say the rebuttal is more subtle, and you're complaining that it's not more on the nose.
Yes. I would agree. I would agree too. Like I don't think it has to explicitly say what the counter argument is, because this person is wrong. Like her methodology and everything. It's like the Black Panther thing. Killmonger has a point. He has a really good point in that movie supports both the good and the bad. But also, his actions through his actions.
Yeah,
this character is doing.
The villainy comes from the fact that they take these ideas and take them way too far and do terrible things in the furtherance of those ideas, but that the ideas themselves aren't necessarily without merit, right?
I just think that they whiffed on the. There seemed like they set up a really interesting villain that comments on parenthood, on screens and the kind of challenge of raising kids in a world of screens, and they just completely whiff on that. There's no interest in having that discussion, even though they set it up. Instead, they invent this completely uninteresting, irrelevant thing about this brother and sister whose dad was killed. By
the way, the dumbest plot line.
Why do we care about how the dad met his demise and whether his phone worked or didn't work? Like that. None of that is irrelevant, I think.
I thought to me the origin was just sort of riffing on the Batman origin story,
right.
And the idea that eventually one of them becomes the villain is sort of like, the Batman origin can turn someone into a hero or a villain. I thought the bigger problem with the screenslaver character is, and in terms of missed potential, although the one about parenting is a good point as well that I hadn't really thought about, was I think it's a fascinating idea for a bad guy. And a character that can comment on our modern life. And the problem is the movie is set in the mid-1960s, roughly, when there's no cell phones. And so the only way to depict people being enslaved to their screens is having people standing around like old-timey department stores where they're staring at displays of televisions, which – not to say that people aren't enslaved to their televisions, but like to me, the missed opportunity is you're making a movie about how modern life is so consumed with these screens that are rotting our minds, and you can't really take full advantage of it because you've made like a period piece where no one has a cell phone. So to me, it was
but you're in a super universe where there's technology that can't exist. I mean, I think there's ways to get around that problem. I just think that they're uninterested in it.
Yeah, but you're right. They could have theoretically. Why not give people cell phones? My
Right.
point is they don't. They didn't. And so the
Right.
most interesting thing you could do, like combining our ideas here, it's like why not have Violet be obsessed with her cell phone and then
Right.
become enthralled to the screenslaver or whatever it is.
100%.
Like I hate to
100%.
tell a movie what to do, but like you're right. These are like really rich potential ideas that would have, I think, taken better advantage of the premise that they have that I totally agree they don't really fully exploit.
Yeah, and instead you just have this character who is for non-supers or regular people trying to make it on their own, trying to defend themselves and make a good life for themselves without the help of supers, being portrayed as the horrifying villain character who wants to, kill lots of people.
Here's the thing that just one more thing I wanted to say about this, because I thought your tweets about how Syndrome is like the, I don't know, the tragic hero or just the victim or however you want to put it in the first film. And, generally, and people have ascribed all these different political viewpoints to Brad Bird and, to the stuff about being super and all that. The thing that I don't know that I feel like is in here that people don't talk about enough, even while acknowledging that I totally see, like I thought Dave's tweets were really funny and on the nose and on point, and we did the video on our YouTube channel about this too, is just like the villains who are espousing these theories are incredibly exceptional in their own way. Like they're incredible inventors. That's the part that maybe the movies do need to be a little more explicit about, is they're complaining that, oh, I want more people to be super. Why aren't, like people need to be yada yada yada, and it's like, well, but you just created rocket boots. You've created the most incredible miniaturized camera technology that's ever existed. Like, why they don't seem to recognize their own superness, and I'm not sure if this is a deliberate choice that we as the audience are maybe not fully exploring on our own, or it's a bug where it's not made explicit enough. I don't know, but I feel like that's like the missing element of this equation that hasn't been fully kind of teased out and written about and thought about enough.
The super was inside you all along.
I just thought it was fascinating that like we had a more engagement with these themes in Captain America: Civil War than we did in these movies that are very much about that topic. I mean, in Captain America: Civil War, there's this big debate about, should superheroes or whatever their term is in those movies, like, should they be allowed to just do whatever they want, or should we regulate them somehow? And the question of whether they should be regulated tears the Avengers apart in some ways. And it could have been done better in that film as well. But I think like at least it addressed it, and I felt like it attempted to address it in an even-handed way. And I feel like these movies are just so simplistic in how they attempt to take it on, that basically, like, yeah, if you're super, you should just continue being super. Like that is the overriding message in both the films, and I just don't find it particularly interesting, because I think it's much more complicated than that. But anyway, enough about my complaints about the movie, guys. I think the train action sequence was pretty amazing.
So
awesome.
And like the motorcycle that detaches. I didn't think that scene would be that interesting. I'm like, she's got to stop a train. How good could this be? But man, her navigating through the city at light speed and then like breaking apart the bike, and it just was so good. It was
attach two wheels to a rubber band and imagine all the possibilities. It really runs with that, and like, she can fling herself and use herself as a sort of slingshot and all of that stuff. It was so inventive and cool. The part where it gets in the tunnel and she's like riding on either side of the walls of the tunnel, it's just awesome.
There was when the bike, at one point she just throws the bike into the mountain and it blows up, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, the bike, it's so good.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
We're never going to see that bike again.
Film just about the bike.
Yeah, we just want a movie.
Give the bike a spinoff.
I like that scene when she also introduces the bike, and she's like, I used to have a mohawk, and he's like, what? She's like, you didn't miss anything. That was great touch.
What I was going to say was, you can say, well, they set up all these ideas and they don't really pay them off, or they don't fully exploit them. The thing in this movie to me was, in terms of the actions, is like every time they introduce something interesting in terms of a power or a gadget or whatever, you got to see it in action. Like the train chase sequence is a good example, and the other one to me was I think is it Void, the character who has the portal power?
So cool.
Is so cool, and the way that it's shot and used in the movie to, I don't know, they really, you could feel like sort of the Pixar magic of like brainstorming every interesting thing you could do with this portal power, and that you couldn't do in live action or would be so much more difficult. Like there's that amazing shot of Dash running through the portals, and you see like it's like the double mirror going on forever shot.
Yeah.
You know, where you're standing in like a changing room and there's two mirrors and it looks like there's a million of you, like, and the camera is like following him through the portals and they just keep going on through infinity. Like that shot is so cool. And then the thing at the end where she's using the portals to kind of launch Elastigirl onto the DevTech plane as it's escaping, and she has to kind of keep doing it over and over again because they keep missing.
Yeah, she has to manage the velocity while doing the portals too. Like it's all good. Like there, I mean, in this world where there are so many superhero movies, it is hard to do something really exciting and unique, and where you see, I don't think I've seen that before in a movie. Well, quick shout out to that is basically an X-Men superpower. Days of Future Past, that opening fight sequence is Portal fight.
I feel like it's done better here.
It is certainly done better here. I'm just saying, like, you can do more because it's CG and the camera can go anywhere.
Right.
But I think back to like that, really great opening sequence of Days of Future Past.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Just the shot, just the simple thing of Elastigirl stretching her arm out into a punch, opening a portal, and then opening another one so she punches herself. Just like so clever and awesome.
Well, I love action sequences where there's just so much going on, right? Like you got to rewatch it because there's more action going on than you can consume in one viewing. That train sequence is going to be one, that big fight. Also, like a lot of the Jack stuff I just love too. Like by the point where you have Jack at the end and seeing they just have so much fun with these powers. And if you have one character who has like 18 powers, they kind of just really go all out with it.
Let me ask you guys this. Let me ask, I'm on a podcast with two fathers and one father to be. Let me ask you, did you find the Jack stuff resonated with you from the perspective of at any point your kid could do something that kills himself or something ridiculous like that? Like, that's 100%. Like I think the subtext of that is like this kid can like do transdimensional teleportation, but really it's very similar to the act of having a regular kid who could go off at any moment by himself or something.
Oh yeah, kids really want to kill themselves. They work really hard at it. It's astonishing how desperately they want to. They welcome the embrace of death. It's uncanny how much of my life is spent just trying not to let my children kill themselves. It's unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, Jack in this movie I thought was like terrific. I mean, he's one of the parts of the first movie that actually I think is definitely improved here because he's barely in the first movie. Yeah. And, he's sort of used as a punchline in the ending where you suddenly see that he has the powers, and that's a great moment. But in this movie, he gets to do a lot of stuff. And the thing with the raccoon is kind of goofy and silly and probably would have been better off as its own short film because it seems kind of – it's like it is kind of its own short film in the middle of the movie. But all the stuff with him driving the father insane really resonates with me because I have a daughter. My youngest is just under Jack's age and looks a lot like Jack. Like it's weird almost how much she looks like Jack.
You probably shouldn't have her wear the mask so much.
Well, she's not like and has this devilish grin when she's refuses to sleep and sticking things in her mouth that she knows she shouldn't. And I thought Jack was almost like the MVP of this movie in a lot of ways. He's really great.
Totally agree.
Jeff, any thoughts?
I mean, my son's name is Jack, and he attempts to, as Matt so eloquently said, do the most dangerous thing at any given moment, trying actively to die. And yeah, I mean, just the idea of the wonderful almost metaphor of Jack like phasing through a door and getting outside. I feel like my son has that power sometimes. How the hell did you even get out there? I just looked away for 1 second, Yeah. It's great.
there is a scene in this movie that I thought was pretty hilarious. To change the topic a little bit, where they meet all the Elastigirl meets all the supers that are in hiding, and it reminded me of this thing that I heard on the director's commentary for the movie Sunshine by Danny Boyle. If you guys have seen that movie Sunshine, where they sent a crew to kind of fix the sun, and then that crew never came back. So they're sending a second crew to fix the sun, and that's the crew that you're following through the course of the movie. And Danny Boyle was saying, "Oh yeah, they're sending like the best people in the world." Well, actually, they're sending the second best people in the world because they would have sent the best people the first time. And it reminded me like, oh, these are all like the B team kind of people that they're meeting, because all the A team people were killed in the first Incredibles, right?
That's
right. Syndrome. Like there's that whole scene where they're like reviewing all the people that Syndrome killed, and those are like top of the top. Like everyone.
But I
knows who
guess
those
he's
people
still
are.
the victim, Dave. Right? Yeah.
Yep, pretty much. But it just it was like these are just like a hilarious. Diverse mix of powers, like the reflux guy. I mean, that is truly a horrifying character. You know, like I have acid reflux, and like the idea of a character who can like spit acid and stuff and the way it's rendered on screen, it just looks horrifying and disgusting. I found it to be like kind of unintentionally amusing. Like these are like the super, like the B team supers. I felt like.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of went off spinning in my head about what are the rules of the Crusher's powers?
Yeah.
Because like, what is the definition of crushing something? Are you able to crush anything? Like,
what
is
can't
really going
uncrush
on
things, right? Like,
I love that they had that conversation. Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you been ever asked to unpunch something? What?
That's so great. Yeah.
At Pixar they called those characters. I don't think they're ever referred to that way in the movie, but they were called the wannabes. That was their informal name for that group at Pixar. I did a little tour of Pixar before the movie was released, like the junket for the film at Pixar, and they mentioned that. The other fun tidbit that they mentioned about those guys that you would never know, but they told us was that there's the guy who has like electricity powers.
Yeah.
Amongst that group, that character was originally the Dever characters, the brother and sister, was supposed to be two brothers, not a brother and a sister. And so the design of the electricity guy, that was the other brother. They reused when they got rid of that character, or when they changed it to the Catherine Keener character, they used the unused design of the brother and made it that superhero.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. By the way, shout out to the Catherine Keener character. I thought she did a great job as being this sort of like really, I don't know, inspiring person as well, and kind of seductive, and then justifiably, angry and evil by the end. And I love the design of her character too. Like there's a lot more, it shows they can do a lot more with hair right now in this movie compared to the first one.
one of my favorite bits of animation in the film was when you first are introduced to that character. And she
comes in and bumbles.
She comes in and she has like 15 schematics on her, blueprints and stuff on her. Probably all the like evil masks and stuff that she's gonna make for Screenslaver, as it were. And just her stumbling and like dropping everything. I just thought, oh my god, like what a human moment that they were able to capture in that one bit of animation. Did you guys did the theme of like the brother and sister and what they represented, did that resonate with you? You already shot down my other complaint, Matt Singer, about like Screenslaver and like first of all, here's the ultimate conflict, Matt, is I think basically in any Incredibles film, of which there's probably going to be another one based on how well this one did, I'm probably going to sympathize more with the villain than the protagonist. I think that's just I need to accept that about myself. But that being said, I'm curious if the theme of the two of them, like what they represented, resonated with you at all. Like there's theoretically this conflict around like big picture, the conflict between we should let supers handle our problems and no, we shouldn't, but also this idea of like her brother being like the salesperson and her being like the ideas person. And I think there was conversation about like what is more valuable. Like did that resonate with, like did you take away any lessons from that at all? Like what were your thoughts on that?
Not particularly. I guess that would be another area where I felt the movie was a little kind of underdeveloped. I think part of it is that it is, they're doing it as a mystery, so you don't know who the bad guy is. So they don't really want to give anything away, and so they have to kind of play their cards close to their vest, and you have to believe that the brother and sister are on the same page the whole time and working together until you discover at the end that she's been manipulating everything all along. I guess the only thing that really resonated with me was just the idea that they are a family, and just like the Incredibles are a family, and so you have you have another family dynamic to explore. In this case, a family that's been sort of torn apart by tragedy, or at least kind of broken by tragedy, and this is their attempt to respond to it by trying to drum up public interest for the supers. But again, some of that is kind of undercut by the eventual revelation that one of them has been working against the plot the whole time. I do think it's kind of, and again, this is something that you could potentially make more interesting if it wasn't a mystery and you could really kind of delve into the character hating each other, would be like if there was like a sibling rivalry here, where it's like really like one of them really wants to make supers legal, and the other ones will like, screw you, I'm going to do everything I can to destroy your plan. Which I could absolutely, like, that's kind of really interesting, is to have like a brother and sister, squabbling via superheroes. But the movie doesn't really do anything with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, instead she subsumes that feeling in herself in order to play a really, really long game of destroying his plan.
She plays the smarter, she's the smarter one, so she does that.
Even at the end of the movie, when they're like, she's going to have to go to jail, he's so upbeat. He's just like, well, she's alive. That's good. That's great. I have a good feeling. Like, he's so they're sort of upending the same cliche we talked about, where we were joking about how the incredibly nice guy who it turns out to be evil. In his case, he's the incredibly nice guy you think is evil, but actually it's sister, and he really is just an incredibly upbeat, nice guy. And there wasn't a lot more to that character that they could have potentially done more with him and with that rivalry. But again, it's like there's only so much you can do in an Incredibles.
I'd
movie,
rather spend more time with the Parr family than those two. So there's that. One thing we should mention, by the way, is the bright light strobing thing, the issue that's been called out. At my screening, there was a hand-drawn sign, right in the door saying, there is a sequence of bright lights and flashing imagery in this movie, and be aware. That's something I haven't seen in a big Hollywood film to this extent. If you don't know, that's the sort of thing, if you have epilepsy, or you are vulnerable to seizures or anything like that, this sort of imagery can trigger a seizure. And that's very bad. And it's crazy to see that, a huge sequence, there's a fight sequence in this movie that is happening in a bright flashing room. So you're trying to track that choreography. Meanwhile, your eyes are just getting overloaded with this flashing light. It is crazy that nobody at Disney saw this as a problem, because anybody who remembers the 90s, there was an episode of Pokemon that kind of triggered seizures with kids in Japan. And since then, ever since then, every anime show, and I think any anime movie, I think in movies they just avoid it, but in anime shows, if there's a bright light sequence, the screen just darkens by like 50%. They just go all the way, just so nobody will have any issues with it. But what did you guys think of that whole thing?
It's a cool moment, man. It's a cool awesome sequence.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very surprising that Disney wouldn't shy away from doing something like that, especially how rampant that problem is.
I got anxiety watching it, because A, it's a very tense scene, but also because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can see this having a really negative effect on some people who have problems with that.
Extraordinarily cool moment, though, man. Like, I've never really seen that in a 3D animated. The whole thing goes really flat looking, and it's a really striking concept of this, this sort of EDM rave room that goes wild in the middle of an action sequence. I thought that was pretty cool, but yeah, it's problematic for sure.
Scared the heck out of my daughter.
I bet.
That was definitely the one scene that she was like covering her eyes,
Mm.
and not because she has epilepsy. It's a spooky scene.
Yeah.
And just because of that, I was chatting with Mikey Newman, from Mikey at the Movies on Twitter, and he can't see the movie in theaters now. Basically, he'll have to wait for home video. It is kind of a serious issue. I'm just surprised nobody at Disney kind of was like, hey, maybe not like this. Maybe
they're like letting theater. They're also letting theater owners like take the hit too.
Yeah.
I saw a sign at my theater too that was like printed out by the theater saying like, "Hey, FYI, there's a sequence of the blah blah blah," and it's like it feels like Disney should be taking more of the lead on this. You could put like a warning before the film, for instance. There's other things they could do, or not even have like completely change Screenslaver's whole aesthetic. That's another thing you could do.
Well, I mean, and the thing with digital distribution too, can't they push updates to the movie after it's been released?
Yes.
So like it seems like there could be like a brightness or a gamma or some sort of like change you could do, but I don't know how much work that would require too.
Yeah. I want to return to one thing that Matt Singer said just as we wrap up here. One about like Screensaver's whole plan. I just felt like the ending was kind of a little ridiculous, given how simplistically we are expected to believe the American people will behave. The idea is, oh hey, all we got to do is show superheroes doing good things, and then everyone's going to be on board with the whole superhero thing. That's like Bob Odenkirk's plan, right? So then at the end of the movie, you have a nationwide broadcast, theoretically, with quote-unquote ambassador so-and-so of what we are never explained, And the you see the superheroes being like, hey, we're going to go kill you guys now. And then, like, that's the end of the transmission. And then next thing, like, if you're living in that city is, oh, this massive boat washed up on shore. So what is the explanation that... hey, the sister of this billionaire dude created these mind control devices that were being used on the supers this whole time, and that's why they said the evil thing. It just felt like, oh wow, we're shortcutting it to the end where everyone has a happy ending. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and if you think about the opening sequence, not that different. The Underminer was going to destroy that building were it not for these people. So
yeah.
Were the law enforcement, the regular non-super law enforcement, going to stop that giant drill from hitting the Capitol?
Well, as they said in the opening scene, Jeff, we have insurance to cover things like that.
Right.
So
there wouldn't be a citywide fight, right, if they just let him do his thing. So it's not like Brad Bird has a good. I don't think he thinks much of like the general public, right? Or at least in the first movie. A couple sequences of property damage or something while the superheroes were trying to do their job, and all of a sudden they're outlawed. I don't know. Like, I think realistically, wouldn't we see more crime or something happening now that the superheroes are outlawed? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, at the end, it's like, oh, I guess everything's forgiven now. Like, people were able to explain that, no, the supers were under mind control. They were really still good. I just think it's pretty silly. So... anyway, any closing thoughts as we wrap up here? I think it's a movie that we enjoyed greatly. Has some issues, not as good as the first one, but still a lot of fun.
I mean, I'm glad that Brad Bird gets to make a superhero movie again, and now that we're in the height of superhero insanity. And it is refreshing to see a movie like this. Like, I still go back thinking of on Infinity War and kind of how disappointed I was with certain aspects of that movie. I didn't go back and see it in theaters. And, I just feel like a certain type of superhero story I'm getting really tired of. And this is still feels fresh, still feels new, and much more rewarding because it's so intimate.
I agree with everything you said, except the negative stuff about Infinity War. But yeah, I mean, I think it definitely does add something to the conversation that Infinity War does not. So well worth checking out. All right, find more episodes of our podcast at /filmcast.com. Email us at /filmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from AdamWarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week. In the meantime, Matt Singer, it's been such a pleasure to have you on today. Where can people find more of your work on the internet this week?
Well, ScreenCrush.com is the website that I run, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/ScreenCrush, and my Twitter account is twitter.com/MattSinger.
Jeff Kanata, how about you?
I'm on Twitter at Jeff Kanata, which is spelled with 2 N's and 1 T. And we just had E3 week, and I have tons of coverage of E3. I spent all week there getting hands-on with all the big games. You can hear me talk about that on my video game podcast, DLC, which you can find at 5by5.tv/DLC. I also have a comedy science show called We Have Concerns. You can find that at wehaveconcerns.com.
How about you, Devindra?
You can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write about tech at Engadget.com.
Find all my stuff at davechen.net, twitter.com/davechensky, that's Dave Chen, SKY. Subscribe to my YouTube at youtube.com/davechensky. And next week, we're going to be talking about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I usually say I'm really looking forward to that conversation, but in this case, I'm not. I'm not looking forward to this movie. But hey, Bayona, maybe he's going to surprise me. He's a really good director, so I just really didn't like that first one. Anyway, all right. Thanks for listening to the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you next week.